You know, it's just nice to see a business doing so well, especially a retailer. How often do you hear about them declaring bankruptcy and closing stores and losing sales? I talk about it on this channel all the time, but Dollar General is truly doing well. They started in the 1950s, have roots going all the way back to the 1930s, I'll talk about all of that, but they've always been fairly successful. A few stumbles and slow periods here and there early on, but ever since the start of the 1990s, pretty much all positive. Let me show you some numbers going back 25 years that are almost too good to be true. Look at this sales graph. In a time of failing retailers all over the place, this is their sales graph. They have grown 17 times higher in the course of 25 years without a single declining year. Every single bar is higher than the one before it. To go along with this, their number of stores. Over this time, it's grown from 2,000 to over 15,000. There were 2 years, in 2007 and 2008, where they closed more stores than they opened, but obviously they came right back from it. But the most impressive graph, in my opinion, is their same store sales. I know, it looks all scattered when you first see it, but keep in mind, this represents an average of how much each store sold when compared to the previous year. Some years were in double digits, other years were less than 1%, but they were all positive. You'd actually have to go back 30 years to find a negative, which I doubt you could say about any other major retailer that exists today. So let's talk about how they got to this point and the potential reasons behind all of this success. J.L. Turner, he's important here. During the Great Depression, he had sort of a depressing job. See, back then, there were a bunch of general stores, and since consumer spending was way down, they were struggling. Many of them to the point of bankruptcy. J.L. would actually search for the ones that had gone bankrupt, buy it at a low price, and just liquidate everything. Like I said, it's not the happiest business, but I suppose he was turning a negative into a positive by finding a way to benefit from the bad economy. JL had a son named Cal Turner, who was a teenager at the time, but he was very involved in helping out with everything. In 1939, once the economy started taking a bit of a turn, JL decided to abandon that business in favor of starting a wholesale business that would provide dry goods to the surviving general stores and other retailers. This time, his son Cal had a bigger role, so the wholesale business JL Turner started with his son was called JL Turner and Son Wholesale. Not the most creative name, but it does relay a lot of information. After a few years, they made another shift by abandoning the wholesale end of things and switching to the retail end, meaning they went from providing the stores with their stuff to becoming the store themselves. And they were successful. Nothing too major, but their chain of department stores impressively grew to 35 locations over the next decade. I'm sure this won't apply to most people watching this, but if you were living in the Kentucky or Tennessee area in the early 1950s, there's a decent chance that you've been to one of them. But in 1955 is when they found their identity and started morphing into the store that we know today. It's a genius idea. At this point, the concept of a dollar store was non-existent, but there was something called dollar days. You still see it sometimes today. It's when a store has a big sale, and for that week, a select group of items are $1 each. Well, Cal Turner, the son, saw how effective those sales were and had the idea of opening a store where it was always dollar days for every item, effectively inventing the concept of the dollar store. Actually, thinking back to one of my previous videos, it was a very similar thought process by F.W. Woolworth that led to the creation of the once outrageously popular 5 and dime stores. So that has me thinking, if you ever see a specific type of promotion or sale that seems especially appealing or effective, it might be smart to open an entire store based on it, because here's 2 examples where that has worked exceptionally well. But anyway, that's what he did. They took one of their existing stores in Springfield, Kentucky, and turned it into the first ever Dollar General store based on the gimmick of everything being less than $1. It was an instant success. Over the next 10 years, they spread all across the Southeast by opening 250 more of them. By 1968, they had grown pretty large, and the Dollar General stores had become almost their entire business, so they had a public stock offering, and when they did it, they saw it fit to change the name of the entire company to Dollar General. That that's how it all came about, but the 250 stores across the Southeast is not quite the 15,000 locations in 44 states that they have today. From this point up until the 1990s, most of their growth can be attributed to acquisitions. It's pretty simple. They had a concept proven to be successful and really just needed to get more of them out there. They strategically expanded into one new market at a time by acquiring a somewhat similar local chain of stores. Notably, in 1977, they spent $8.2 million on this chain of 88 stores in Arkansas called United Dollar Stores. In 1983, they spent $50 million on a 280 store chain in St. Louis called P.N. Hirsch. In 1985, it was another 200 stores from a Florida-based chain called Eagle Discount for $30 million. Those three acquisitions alone accounted for almost half of their 1,300 stores at this time, but those three acquisitions cost them almost $100 million. By the end of the 1980s, the company concluded that they were spending too much money, the investors were losing faith in the plan, so they tapped the brakes a bit and started opening more of their own stores. That shift was big for them because it gave them more control over where the new stores would be located. During this time, easily the biggest competition for just about any retailer were the large discount stores, namely Kmart and Walmart. They were exploding, but consider they were placing their stores in more populated areas, ideally ones with more money. It makes perfect sense. I mean, why not just place your stores where there's a lot of people that have a lot of money to spend? And I'll tell you why not, because everyone else was doing it. I mean, let's face it, Dollar General has never been a classy, upper scale store. It's meant for people with lower incomes or for people with limited options. This is when they really started to lay into that identity. Their approach was to open stores anywhere that other major retailers were avoiding. This meant either opening stores in areas with low populations or low incomes, and that strategy has been fantastic for them. Even today, they identify their core customers as low and fixed income households often underserved by other retailers. And they disclose that 75% of their stores are located in towns of 20,000 or fewer people. So in answering why they're successful, I'd say this is a big part of it. While everyone else is going for the big fish, Dollar General is doing just fine catching all the tiny ones that no one else wanted. Now, I don't want to drift off subject or create an entire political debate, but the shrinking middle class, we've all heard about this. It's said to be happening and bringing more people into the lower class, which is creating more customers for Dollar General. The CEO himself has said the economy is continuing to create more of our core customer, which by the way is people with household incomes below $40,000 a year. He has also said that they've been able to place new stores in areas that were not quite poor enough a few years earlier. In short, their customer base is growing, and that's been good for sales. Also, consider how much it costs to open a new store in a poor neighborhood compared to a rich one, or in a small town compared to a big city. These are low rent areas, which makes it easier for them to open these new locations. In 2018, they opened an average of 2.3 locations per day, pushing them past that 15,000 mark, all of which are in the United States, which is actually 3 times more than Walmart has in the United States. The big difference, of course, being the store size. Walmart has them beat in total square footage, since each one averages over 100,000, whereas Dollar General is only 7,400. My point is, with all these factors, imagine just how much cheaper it is to open a Dollar General in a small town compared to a Walmart in a bigger city. I should point out, these are also very basic stores. For lack of a better term, Dollar General is sort of a place you're forced to shop at. People typically go there either because they're cheaper or closer than other stores. They compete mostly through convenience and price, which means they don't have to impress you. These stores could be worn out, disorganized, poor customer service, anything you could think of that leads to a poor customer experience, and it doesn't even matter that much. It all helps explain how they've been able to grow so large and keep their costs down, and theoretically pass the savings onto the customer. That leads me to another thing I'd like to mention. It's called Dollar General. It's considered to be a dollar store, the first one ever as a matter of fact, but they no longer sell everything for $1. This is where it starts to get a little manipulative. I like to think of this as the opposite of Costco. I've made an entire video about it, but Costco sells large quantities at small margins, whereas Dollar General sells small quantities at large margins. Their gross profit margin is over 30%, which is higher than Walmart or Target or most most other popular retailers. Like I said, it's kind of manipulating what the customer sees as being cheap. Many of their prices are lower than other stores, but in many cases, it's just because they're selling them in lower quantities. When that's the case, you're usually paying more per unit. And to add another layer, 77% of their sales come from consumables, which is your traditional grocery items, food and soap and things like that, but they identify those as their lowest margin sales, so everything that doesn't fall into that category likely has a margin well over that 30%. To summarize, Dollar General is quite possibly one of the biggest success stories in retail over the past few decades, and a big part of that is targeting customers that others ignore. For them, it's all about low income and low population areas. That's been their plan from the beginning, but they've really committed to it over the past 30 years or so, and look how well it's worked. Some of the compliments to that plan are a growing customer base, low rents due to opening small locations in undesirable areas, low costs overall due to targeting customers that are forced to shop there, and some of the highest margins in the industry partially due to selling in small quantities. Combine it all together and it can help explain almost 3 decades of non-stop growth and success. Let me know in the comments, what do you think of these graphs? Because you don't see something like this often. But I guess, more importantly, what do you think of my reasons explaining them? Obviously, it's not a complete list, but I touched on the factors that I found to be most relevant in explaining their success. If you have any more that you think are significant, please, I encourage you to talk about them. You know, I kind of want to test this out. They say 75% of them are located in small towns with under 20,000 people. I should ask, is that the case for you? Is there one near you? And if so, do you live in a small town? I'm curious if these results reflect that 75%. Also, before you start with the comments, I know, Dollar Tree, Family Dollar, there's a few of these dollar store chains that tend to be grouped together, but I'd say most of what I talked about here is unique to Dollar General. It's kind of a separate case that I thought deserved its own video. So let me know if you want me to talk about the others, either on their own or in a comparison video. What do you think? I'd like to hear what you have to say. Thank you for watching.